Three-team deal here. Lauri Markkanen going to the Cleveland Cavaliers in a signing trade. Larry Nance Jr. going to the Portland Trail Blazers. And Derrick Jones Jr. in a first-round pick and draft compensation to the Chicago Bulls. So the Bulls here, we know they had a great offseason. And we heard reports over the last few weeks that Lauri Markkanen, he just didn't want to be in Chicago anymore. And today it came to fruition where he signs a 4-year, $67 million deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the Cavs here, they got a pretty good young nucleus now, in my opinion here. You got Lauri Markkanen, you got Mobley in the draft this season, Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, Jared Allen. So they got a lot of decent pieces over there, in my opinion. And now you add Markkanen to the mix, who could hit the three ball, could stretch the floor, and he could score the basketball. So the last couple seasons here for Markkanen, 2019, 14.7 points a game, 6.3 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 2.5% from the field. And last season, 51 games played, 13.6 points a game, 5.3 rebounds, assists a game in only 51 games for Markkanen. So Markkanen here, like I mentioned, Chicago, they got a lot of players right now over there, and I think he just needed to get out of Chicago and do something different. And he's only 24 years old, is Markkanen, so he's got his whole career ahead of him still, and he got the big money as well that Chicago didn't have the cap room really to do it, even though they could have gave him the offer where they could have matched anything. But right here, they parted ways. And we saw the Bulls have a big offseason already this year. They got Lonzo Ball. They got Zach LaVine coming back this season. You got Vukovic last season in a trade. And you also got DeMar DeRozan. So it was a big offseason for the Chicago Bull team. And here, they get a couple draft picks. Probably nothing high it's going to be when it's all said and done. Because obviously the Portland Trail Blazers are still obviously a team that's going to contend, so that pick will probably be in the 20s. But anyway, I think Lauri Markkanen, it's a good landing spot, especially for fantasy basketball. I think he could be one of the better scorers on this Cleveland Cavalier team in the upcoming season. So he's a player I'm probably going to target anywhere from the 6th to the 8th round of most fantasy draft. After the last couple years, he's dealt with injuries, and a guy who really wasn't motivated to play in Chicago, obviously. And those are the reports we heard leading up to the deal. So for the Portland Trail Blazers, they get a nice young player in Larry Nance Jr. who does all the intangibles, but obviously he's not a superstar or an all-star that'll be a huge piece to your team, but he's a good player to come off the bench at forward in the center position. And the last couple seasons here for Nance, 10 points a game in 2019-2020, 7.3 rebounds and 2.2 assists. And last season with Cleveland, once again the injury bug got him, 9.3 points a game, 6.7 boards, and 3.1 assists. So Larry Nance, he's definitely a good intangible guy, but obviously injuries have been a concern throughout his career. But last year, he was a top 40 fantasy player, just with everything that he could do with the field goal, the steals, the blocks. And now he lands in Portland, where obviously his fantasy value, in my opinion, is going to go down, because Portland, they got a lot of good players on that roster. And Nance, like I mentioned, he's most likely going to come off the bench, but I still would draft him in fantasy leagues as your leagues approach in the next month or two here. Anywhere from probably the 7th to the 10th round range, Larry Nance will go, because he's not going to kill you in a lot of percentage of things, and he's not going to be an amazing guy as well. He's just going to be a solid fantasy player. But like I mentioned, Portland, they got a lot of good players, and Nance, he'll be like the 4th or 5th option on that offense. And now Derrick Jones Jr., who was a starter for most of the season last year with the Portland Trail Blazers, now he goes to another team here, is Jones Jr., and he'll come off the bench most likely in Chicago. And we know he's an athletic wing, no doubt about it, who could fly, he could block shots as well, and he's still only 24 years old, as well as Derrick Jones Jr. But now he's bounced around the league the last couple of years between Phoenix, Miami, Portland, and now obviously going to the Chicago Bulls. Last season for Derrick Jones, 6.8 points a game, 3.5 rebounds a game, 64% from the foul line, and 55% from the field here was Derrick Jones. So he's not going to do much for fantasy owners, even though I could see him playing 20, 25 minutes a game off the bench for the Chicago Bulls. He's a better real-life player than a fantasy basketball player, in my opinion. So he's going to target draft day in your fantasy leagues, and a guy that'll be on your free agents after your drafts. But Derrick Jones Jr., I still think he contribute and be a decent piece to this Bull team. And this was a surprising deal here towards the end of August, one of the biggest trades of the offseason, I believe, even though not many people would think that. I think it's an impactful trade for all the teams here. So Lauri Markkanen finally leaves the Chicago Bulls in a signing trade in a 3-team deal with the Portland Trailblazers, Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Bulls. And we'll see what Markkanen could do for the Cleveland Cavaliers and fantasy owners in the upcoming 2021-2022 season.